Hello, I'm Bob Mayer and welcome to my YouTube channel. This video is about Ulysses S. Grant, his early years before the Civil War. I found Grant to be one of the most interesting characters in history. His biography, which Mark Twain got him to write, was the #1 selling nonfiction book of the century. But most people don't know a lot about his early years before he rose to fame and prominence. As a fellow graduate of West Point, I always thought it was weird that there was a lot of focus on Robert E. Lee and not so much on Grant, because Grant was the winner. So he was born in Point Pleasant, Ohio in 1822. His given name was Hiram Ulysses Grant. His father was a tanner, and Grant hated that so much he swore to get away from it. He was kind of an agnostic. He wasn't big into religion. So that was part of the impetus for him to go to West Point. When he was appointed to West Point, the congressman who appointed him wrote his name down as Ulysses S. Grant of Ohio. So as any of you who have been in the Army know, once the Army says something to something, that's it. That was his name. His friends called him Sam. He wasn't particularly enthralled with military life. He had two subjects he was really good at with his math and art, which if you think about it, that's left-brained, right-brained, which is kind of weird. He was very even-brained, very even-keeled. He was also a horse whisperer, which is rather interesting. He studied art under Robert Walter Weir, and he did paint that thing up above in this slide. He was a horse whisperer. He sent a high jump record at the academy that stood for 25 years. Part of what helped with that was he was very small. He probably weighed about 125 pounds when he did this. Yeah, an aide remarked the only time he saw Grant get really, really angry was someone was beating a horse. He graduated the class of 43, ranking 21st in a class of 38. Of course, he wanted to go cavalry, but his class ranking, he got sent to the infantry. Even when I graduated, we chose our branches. We all went down to an auditorium, and there were so many slots per branch, and #1 got to pick whatever they wanted, and it went on down the line. He married Julia Dent in 1844. Longstreet was his best man. They were both stationed outside St. Louis at Jefferson Barracks. War with Mexico loomed. It was a totally, historically, it was a war of conquest. We have Scott's fixed opinion, which we had to memorize as cadets. I give it as my fixed opinion that but for our graduated cadets, the war between the United States and Mexico might and probably would have lasted some 4 or 5 years, with in its first half more defeats than victories falling to our share. Whereas in less than 2 campaigns, we conquered a great country and a peace without a single loss, without the loss of a single battle skirmish. But the Mexican War was also the bloodiest war we've ever fought, percentage-wise, of the troops involved in it. A lot of the leaders of the Civil War were blooded in the Mexican War. Robert E. Lee, Grant, Longstreet, George Pickett. We all know Pickett's charge, but he led a charge at the Battle of Chapultepec, and he took the colors from a wounded James Longstreet and carried them over the wall. When those colors went over the wall, by the way, the Irish Brigade, which was American Irish soldiers who defected to fight for Mexico because of the Catholicism, they were hung. He was promoted to temporary captain during the war. He was breveted for bravery. During the war, he was a quartermaster for most of that, which is rather interesting for those of you who study military strategy. Being able to supply the army is a critical skill, and it served him very well in the Civil War. Nevertheless, Grant was not big on the Mexican War. He was bitterly opposed to it, and later on, when he wrote about it, he said he believes, we were punished by the Civil War because we started the Mexican War. Southern Rebellion was largely the outgrowth of the Mexican War. Nations are punished for their transgressions. He was first assigned to Detroit after he graduated, then sent to the remote Pacific Northwest. Separated from his wife, Grant always had a problem when he was separated from his wife. He began to drink. The thing about Grant's drinking was he didn't drink a lot. He just couldn't handle his liquor. He was given an opportunity to resign, and he took it. He went back to St. Louis with his wife and tried to make a go of it. His farm, he called it hard scrabble. That failed. Even in the Civil War, historians have noticed his binges tend to occur like outside the siege of Vicksburg when he was separated from Julia. He failed at farming. He tried to sell firewood. But nevertheless, in 1859, he was destitute. He freed his wife's only slave. She inherited from her family, worth $1,500. And he ended up working back at the place he didn't want to be, the leather store. On 12 April 1861, Fort Sumter is fired upon, and Grant said, "I never went into our leather store again." And it takes whatever it takes to motivate you. And I like this saying, there are two parties now, traitors and patriots, and I want hereafter to be ranked with the latter, and I trust the stronger party. And he was right. And I'm going to stop there. I take Grant's story from West Point all the way into the Civil War, my Duty Honor Country series. This poster was there at West Point when I was there, and I always found it fascinating that they put Robert E. Lee front and center. I believe in the latest version of this poster, Lee is not on the poster at all, and I don't think he should be. That's controversial, but at West Point, much of the history I teach was made by the people we taught. This is my Duty Honor Country series. Duty starts at West Point. It's free on all ebook platforms, and it starts with Grant and Sherman and my two fictional characters. If you've seen the miniseries Rome with Varenus and Pullo, I did that sort of. I had two fictional cadets interacting with all these historical characters, and I take them through Honor, which is the Mexican War, up into Country, which is the Civil War, up to the Battle of Shiloh there on the cover. That's the sunken lane at Shiloh. I've also written a book that got me in a little bit of trouble at West Point called The Line. What if there's a coup planned by a secret group of West Pointers? And this is my background. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and because I'm going to be posting a lot more interesting stuff and also a lot of information on survival if you haven't checked it out already.